From the Windows, Doors, and More Studios, your one-stop shop for all your kitchen and bath needs. The Pat Miller Program. WOWO, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Depend on it.
Hey, good afternoon. Happy weekend to everybody. This is the last Saturday before the primaries, if we live through it. I mean, this has been a primary of pressure unlike anything that I've gone through most of my life. But I believe that it's going to play out. Everybody's going to be living still after it's all done, and we'll take it from there. But I'm not going to get to the election yet. We'll get to some election stuff a little bit later. Andy Zay, who is a candidate for 3rd District, will be with us at the 12:30 portion of the program. An hour later, at the 1:30 portion, Grant Bucher will be with us. He's also going for the 3rd District. Also coming up in the 1 o'clock hour at the start of that, talking to a couple of guys from Race for the Warrior. This is an incredibly exciting event. Can't wait for it, and I want to talk to you about that. All that's coming up. But first, let's break into just a few little news items I wanted to grab. Columbia University's Jew-hating protesters. I don't know if you've been listening to any of the chants and the screams and the torches and the flag burnings. I heard one yesterday out of them, and they were screaming, "Glory to all our martyrs." Glory to all our martyrs. Okay, so you've got some kids at school at Columbia whose parents are writing $80,000 and $90,000 checks for them to go to that school, for a year. $90,000 a year. And this is what they're getting out of it? You stop them. They've had man on the street interviews. They stick the mic in their face and ask them. They don't even know what the fight's about. They can't even point to Gaza. Most of them can't even point to Israel. And they're not sure who for. You ask them a question, and you see them turn, "Sally, I don't know. What were we saying? What did they tell us to say?" Because, do you have a brain in your head? Obviously, no. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be wasting your right to free speech the way you are. And I'm sorry, that's just me. If they want to go out there and make idiots out of themselves, knock yourself out. And you're not doing a bad job of it, because everybody that listens to you thinks probably you're an idiot. Glory to all our martyrs. These people are of the same thought and same alignment and same process as the people that climbed into our planes and flew them into buildings on 9/11. Would we call them our martyrs? I call them the murderers. I call them those that wreak havoc. I call them the hands of Satan is what I call them, because that's what they are. And these people, somebody take them, sit them down in a room. You've got lots of them at Columbia. You got lots of recording equipment. You've got lots of projection rooms. Set them down. Well, no, we got to go out and walk. Sit down. And then show them. Just show them the audio and the video of the night that the people from Gaza cut through the fencing and poured into southern Israel and began to rape and maim women, teen girls, some younger, abuse boys, take them back as prisoners. And we try to stand up for Israel. Who was attacked, by the way? Well, you're just doing it because it's Israel and because they're our best friends. Well, that's part of it. But you know what? Even if you have a nation that's not exactly our best friend, and this is how they were treated, I would like to think that we might offer some assistance to them as well. I would like to think maybe, just maybe, we offered some assistance to them just because of how they were treated. Glory to all our martyrs. Then you get the brilliant brain in the press room at the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. And Karine came out and actually said this week. No other president has spoken about anti-Semitism more than this president. He didn't even start saying it until earlier this week. And even then, I can't figure out what he's saying. And he has spoken about it more than any other president. And then in New York, Jamal Bowman, congressman, came out and said this. The protesters are going to do what they got to do. For me, it needs to just remain nonviolent. Make sure no person is harmed in the process. I'm concerned about the heavy-handed repressive response from Colombia's president, New York City's mayor, and from states across the country. You're worried about... I'm sorry, help me, people. I'm just telling you right now. Send me a text, 46862. Text WOWO, then your question or comment. Tell me where I'm wrong here. These people broke in to Israel, busted through the southern border, and then murdered, raped, maimed, took captive thousands of people from Israel. They're still in captivity, by the way. And then they go and they hide in hospitals, they hide in schools, they hide behind children, they hide wherever they can, and in the midst of all of that, they're the martyrs? And Israel needs to give them a ceasefire? Israel needs to back off? Israel needs to make sure they can get food and medicine. Israel made sure they could get food and medicine. They sent it to them. And what happened? The martyrs took the food and they're using it for themselves, and the clothing for themselves, and the coats for themselves. The people down there, those that were taken captive and those who have been captive in their own country ever since in their ignorance they voted Hamas in as their government du jour, since all that happened, they too are captives, and they too are endangered because of the stupid leadership of Hamas. When Israel said, we're coming in and we want to be able to come in and not kill the people that are there, we're coming across the border. If you are in Hamas and you are not part of this and you don't want to bear the brunt of the anger of Israel for what has happened to us, get to the south border. Get in your cars, get in your trucks, get on your camels, do whatever, and get south of the border, get away from the northern border. And so they started to do that. And then what happened? Hamas, their leadership, the ones that are making sure they're okay, Hamas stopped them at gunpoint and made them turn around and go back home to where they had been living. So that if Israel comes across the border, they're sitting ducks. Now, will Hamas be there? No, they're down in their bunkers and down in their little trails and down in their burrows that they've dug under the schools and under the hospitals. No, they'll be fine. Don't worry about the great, mighty leaders, Hamas. They'll be taken care of. Glory to all our martyrs. The martyrs are the people that are down there underneath Gaza, in your tunnels where you're keeping them captive, and you continue to rape them and you continue to beat young children. Those are the martyrs. The very fact that the United States, with all of our knowledge, would make them, Hamas, the picture of martyrs in that country is insanity to me. Absolute insanity. I mean, when you've got somebody like Chuck Schumer, who said smashing windows with hammers and taking over universities is not free speech. It is lawlessness, and those who did it should properly face the consequences. Chuck, why don't you come out and say the same thing about Hamas and Israel? Why don't you come out and say they too need to pay a price for what they've done and what they're doing? Stand up to the plate, Chuck. Come on. This should not be a Republican-Democrat thing. Do you remember when our buildings were attacked on 9/11 and everybody in Congress came out on the steps in unity and looked into the cameras and said, no more, this stops. This is not Republican, this is not Democrat. Tonight we're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, we're Americans. We need to find that spirit again, because if we don't, Hamas is going to have a victory over us as well. More coming up after a quick break. Let's do it straight ahead, shall we? So glad that you're with us on this Saturday. This is Pat Miller coming to you from WOWO here on 92.3 FM and on 1190 AM.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WOWO, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM, and on the WOWO app.
Hey, welcome back. Glad you guys are with us on this Saturday. Some of you in the texting, Pat, you're getting a little wound up. Yeah, you know what? It's time somebody got wound up. We can't seem to get Democrats and some Republicans wound up about what's happened. We need to find a way to do that. We need to find a way to do that. Steve Orlando, who is a University of Florida spokesperson, said this: "This is not complicated. The University of Florida is not a daycare, and we do not treat protesters like children. They knew the rules, they broke the rules, and they'll face the consequences." They can do that in Florida, but we can't seem to do that up there at Harvard or Columbia. Columbia's a mess. Go get footage. Go on Google, go on whatever search engine you use, and put in Columbia University protesters and get ready to watch and read stuff you're not going to believe is happening in America. Not at some of the prestige, the upper crust colleges in our midst. Yeah. Steve Orlando says, look, these people came here to the University of Florida, and they think that they're going to go out there and they're going to mess up our campus and mess up our school, that they're going to mess up our study system, that they're going to take away the ability for people to go to class. We're not going to have it. I saw a video day before yesterday of a young man, nice-looking young man, 19 years old, in his second year, and he's there at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and he's there, and there because he is Jewish, and he's obviously Jewish by his looks and the fact that he was wearing a yarmulke. Because he's Jewish, they would not let him pass. And he said, hey, I'm not coming in to protest for you. I'm not coming in to protest against you, but that building over there is where my class is, and if I can't be there in that class, I won't be ready for my finals next week, and my entire semester will be lost. And every time he tried to walk a different way just to get to that building, 4 or 5 of them just kept moving to stay in front of him. They were daring him to try to ram through their little wall that they were making. Absolutely stupid. Look, aimless, privileged, value-free young people seek revolution. In fact, they always have. They always have. Bored middle-class to upper-class kids have been privileged by a system that has handed them everything but given no mission by their parents other than, go to school, honey, go find yourselves. Just go find yourself. Okay, first of all, Pat Miller, sermon number 1 today. Young people finding themselves, if it doesn't happen in the home first, it's not going to happen. They need to find themselves under the confines of mom and dad. That's where they need to learn. Then they can go to university if they want and know who they are before they get there. And that way, when they find groups or clubs or organizations or happenings that enhance who and what they are, they can join into that. If they find things that are counter to it, they can avoid it. But we send kids, well, I wrote the check. I sent them to university. It's an Ivy League school. Well, this is what you get. Because they get there not knowing who they are, and then they meet these fellow revolutionaries, and revolutionary professors, by the way, who inform them that the system that has given them their privilege is, in fact, corrupt and evil. The fact that your dad could write that check and put you here on this university campus is evil and corrupt. And so then they start feeling guilty. And the only way to alleviate that guilt is to join the revolution. It's the only way they know to get there. It's so insane. It's absolutely insane. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, he said anti-Semitism is a virus. And because the administration and woke university presidents aren't stepping in, we're seeing this virus spread. How nuts is it? How absolutely nuts is it? If this was a genuine response, would these things not have started on our campuses 2 days after the whole problem with Hamas and Israel started? Why would it take this long to shore itself up? Why would it do that? It shouldn't do that. It shouldn't do that. They should have been out there immediately. People were calling for things immediately after 9/11. Immediately. But now, we don't talk about 9/11. We think that those that are coming through for false claims of asylum over our own southern border, which is raping our country and bringing fentanyl and other problems into our nation at a degree and to a state that we don't even know how bad it's going to be yet, but we will. We'll wake up someday and we'll say, what happened to us? Look to your southern border and look to your White House. And then we sit there and say, yeah, what happened in 9/11? It was awful. It was horrible. We never talk about it again. And now this is happening over there, and we pick sides with Hamas over Israel. Hamas could only be where they are in Gaza because Israel allowed it. If you look at all the Arab countries that are around Israel, not one has any population of Jews in their country. Yet the Jews right now in Israel are allowing a population of about 24% of their country to Arabs. Bethlehem is controlled by the Arabs. When I was in Israel last year in March, Kim and I were there. Beautiful place, great trip. But our guide, who is Israeli and Hebrew, could not go there with us. I said, you can't go to Bethlehem? He said, no. Bethlehem is now an Arabic-controlled city. It is, you ready, 98 to 99% Arab. That's Bethlehem. He almost started weeping in front of me. For a long time, they've not been able to go on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but now they can't even go in Bethlehem. There was one point when I saw a group of people and young people while we were there, and I was coming out of a gift shop, and I could tell some of them were armed. And just the way they glared at me when I came out, I thought, Bethlehem, this is the birthplace of my Savior. And I don't feel safe here. It's amazing. That's the world we're coming to. And as Mike Johnson says, anti-Semitism now is a virus. Because everybody that's functioning with anti-Semitism in the Middle East and in Europe, our young people are looking to them as their models and their heroes. Those are not your models. Those are not your heroes. Those are evil, wretched people doing evil, wretched things. Pat, you're being awfully nasty about it. It's nasty stuff. This is nasty business. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic, hateful pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. Now, who are these little Gazas? Well, in something I read the other day, that's what Senator Tim Cotton from Arkansas, brilliant guy, by the way, but Senator Cotton says that's what we've got on our college campuses right now, little Gazas. Look, these terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran. We've got young people, our brilliant kids, at our prime universities in our country, and they sound just like the Ayatollah and all of his minions coming out of Iran. Did you think you'd ever hear a talk show host say that in America? And yet that's where we are. That frightens me to death. It genuinely scares me to think that's where we are. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the occupiers when we come back. But first, I'm going to have an interview right after our bottom of the hour break here. Andy Zay, who is he is a state senator from over around the Huntington area, Wabash. You folks over there know him quite well. He's running for 3rd District, and we will talk to him briefly. That comes up straight ahead. Then more of my takes on the war, and I'm excited about the start of the 1 o'clock hour. Race for the Warrior. What is that? I think it's one of the great things going on in our area, and we'll talk about it. I'll be back with more straight ahead. This is Pat Miller right here on WOWO 92.3 FM and on 1190 AM. And welcome back. And as promised, our first of a few guests that we're going to have on this Saturday here on the Pat Miller program, we've got Andy Zay, who is, let's see, the Senate district that you're in now for the state of Indiana, you're in the 17th.
Yes.
Okay, I can't keep all those straight. You know,
got it.
I know Liz is my senator.
Right.
I think it's the 15th, but I could be wrong. I have no idea.
Sounds right, yeah.
So Andy, how are you?
I'm well. I'm very well. Rested up, ready to close here strong.
Yeah. Well, let me congratulate you on one thing about your campaign, if nothing else. I've received nothing in my mail that tells me that you're the scum of the earth, nor have I gotten anything in my mailbox where you're calling somebody else the scum of the earth. This has been a wild, almost wicked campaign.
It is, Pat, and you can't always design a campaign to come out the way mine has, but I really love where we're at right now. I joked yesterday with Kayla about sleeping well on election night, and part of that, a huge part of that is obviously the effort we've put into the campaign, but the second part is being able to run a clean campaign and finish in a positive manner and really run the entire campaign positive. And I hold that in high regard. It's my record as a businessman. It's my record with a family and as an individual, and how I carry myself with my family, and certainly my last 8 years of serving Indiana as a senator. That I want to win on the merits, and I want the people of the 3rd District to choose their candidate, not be mounts to some of the influences that have come and weighed into this race into the millions of dollars out of D.C.
Whether they're for the people that I'm for, I don't want super PACs in D.C. who've never set foot in the state of Indiana telling me who it is I need to pick as my representative. I need to protect my small business, just like you do. Mm-hmm. I need to protect my family, my church. I need to protect what I know is real and right. Some of these people, I'm getting all these flyers. They're spending $25,000 every time they do a mailing to send me all this stuff for my guy, against my guy, for my lady, against my lady, whatever it is. They're clueless. They don't know anything about us. Let me pick my own representative.
Yeah, and I think what we're playing into, in a broad spectrum, is the uninformed voter, and they're impressionable in that. We know these things work, which is why it's being done. And, and the great thing about that, even for me, is I've always looked at my job in public service as being an educator. Mm-hmm. If I'm having a fundraiser, if I'm at a public event speaking with people, I'm always educating them on the process of the democratic process and how things work. And, which is honestly why I'm running for the congressional seat, because I think it's those processes that are broken. Yeah. Not using the committee process, certainly the way that we do down in Indianapolis. And I think there can be a lot of change and a lot brought to a head there that creates that transparency, creates that engagement that is so critical. And it's, I think a lot of that dysfunction was really driving this uninformed voter probably to a higher level, a lot higher percentage than even, certainly than I would like as a candidate.
When Mitch Daniels became governor of Indiana, mm-hmm. and of course he had been very involved with the finances at mm-hmm. the White House, and he came back and he became our governor, and he said, we need to get out of this $1 billion hole. Mm-hmm. And we need to do it within my first 2 terms. Well, they didn't. They did it within the first term.
Right.
And so we've cleared that, and then we put in this whole balanced budget where we can't overspend in Indiana. We just can't do it. We legally can't do it.
Right.
Can we not do that in Washington?
Absolutely, and that's what I've said all along. I aspire to take Hoosier values to D.C. and keep D.C. values there, or even push them out into the Atlantic, honestly. But we kind of get walked over. We're talked about as a flyover state and that kind of thing. But how do we get it mm-hmm. in Indiana? Yeah. And a collection of folks don't get it in D.C. I'm not always the smartest cookie in the room, but I've figured it out, and I work with my colleagues, and I bring good people around me to do the very thing that you suggest, to do a balanced budget, to invest in our priorities still, to keep responsible reserves, and put checks on those, so when our reserves get too high, we actually give money back to our citizens. Yep. And I think a huge part of that.
If you say that in D.C., some people are going to go into a coma. You know that, right?
Absolutely. But I think the big part of that, which many legislators have worked on, good friends of ours, we've got to get a smaller government. The spectrum of federal government is way beyond what the founders ever intended, and they're getting into and creeping into so many aspects of our life, and all that has dollar bills attached to it. Yeah. So to get it back into its lane is going to be a huge part and a huge challenge of accomplishing any sort of balanced budget.
One of the things that you talked about was relative to the voter turnout on election. Do you think possibly be because this election, and not from your perspective or your involvement, has been ugly and nasty. Do you think that will cause more people to come out and vote, or do you think more people will just say, screw it all, and they'll just stay home?
No, what our experience, I mean, we've done tens of thousands of door knocks, so we've been out amongst the voters, and the sentiment that we are getting from the voters is frustration. And I think just frustration alone, whether it's the field of candidates, whether it's the tone of the race, is going to suppress the voter turnout.
Yeah.
So what we hoped initially is going back to 2016, potentially having that 45-50% turnout. It's not looking like that at all. You may get 30%.
Right.
Tops.
If you're lucky.
Which would be 2 to 3 times local last year, but still, I think it's going to be down significantly.
Well, and the one advantage, because if you become 3rd District rep, you're going to go through this every 2 years.
Right.
The one advantage of this year is it's also a presidential election, and the whole Biden-Trump thing might pull out a certain number of voters too.
It might, but that's pretty much settled. So we also had that figured in at one point, and we think we're going to lose about 20,000 votes because the presidential race is already settled. Mm-hmm. And so now, as you see these other factors weigh in, it's going to suppress voting, I believe.
Yeah. No, I think
and it's very
right.
unfortunate. And, I've done over 870 events myself since last May.
How many?
Over 870 events. We are 368 days into my campaign, and we have really put ourselves out amongst the people. And I mean, to do that and to hear their voices, to listen to them, and to try and bring them to my side and get them out to vote is a tremendous challenge. And we thought we were on a great trajectory, I think, many months ago. And certainly, as the way things have played out, we're seeing that participation, I think, come down.
Where do you view yourself? I mean, you were in the top 4. You were in the most recent debate that was held, and I think that was determined by money raised and all that. So, I mean, whether it's right or wrong, the Andy Downs Center were like, okay, these 4, these are the players. This is where it's going to come from. Do you view that as very, very positive for your part? I mean, the fact that you're there, and do you kind of hope maybe the 3 above you shoot each other?
Absolutely. And like I said, we've had a campaign, like I said, it's 368 days. At one time or another, we've always discussed another candidate or another. And what we've always gravitated to is execute the plan. So we've laid out a plan which we really haven't deviated from much. And that plan has allowed us to be amongst the voters. It's allowed us to be positive. It's allowed us to reflect on my experience and my background. And that has been critical. Yes, there's other influences, there's other things going on around us because there's a lot of folks in this race. But it's, kind of selfishly, it's been about us and broadcasting ourselves to the voters. And we are hopeful that is what will come to elect us in the end.
Don't you think some people will find that overly refreshing? I mean, you're not telling me why this guy is the scum of the earth or why she should never hold office, and you're not pushing at this one and throwing mud at that one, but you're saying, hey, take a minute and look at me. Here's who I am. Here's what I can offer. That's refreshing, and that used to be the way campaigns were.
Well, that doesn't always win, but you know what? I'm hopeful, and I believe it will in this case. And here's a perspective that we've taken on in the last week or so. There's been a ton of polling done, and the outside interests are polling to figure out where the inflection points are and who to whack a mole and who to hit over the head and all that. Well, we're doing a poll every day. And what I mean by that is I have a team of door knockers out every day talking to hundreds of voters. So we're getting feedback from them every single day. And I mean, we're hitting 1,200 doors, 1,500 doors a day now. And so these people are telling us what they're saying. And they're saying exactly that they're worn out with the negative, that is not good. And so when we share with them, we've stayed positive and we plan on finishing positive. We're winning a lot of votes just on that.
Now, you've served down in Indy since when?
I replaced Jim. So when Jim moved to Congress, I took his seat.
So 6 years.
I did 8. This was my 8th session this winter.
Now, you can't be on an Indiana ballot for more than one office, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, this is an odd question to ask. Should you not be the one that wins the primary? Are you still eligible to be back on the ballot to return to the Indiana Senate?
I will be a senator till I resign, and I'm midterm of my Senate race. So, yes, I would be a senator before and after these elections. And much like I came in when Jim won, if I would win in May, win in November, I will resign then and move into the congressional seat.
Do you find canvassing areas that you don't know as well? Because, for 8 years, you've canvassed in and around Huntington and Wabash and all that. this has got to feel somewhat different, and it's a pretty large order to be out there in all those areas all over the 3rd District.
Oh, but that's what motivates you. I mean, building networks, meeting new people, seeing how communities operate, seeing how local parties operate. The dynamic of that from Steuben County down to Randolph County is amazing. It's so different. And
They
of
are
course,
different.
And of course, what Steve does here in Allen County. And, you know, it's working with those parties. It's meeting the people in those communities. It's, you know, in as much as there's such a broad diversity in the people in that, there is some commonality. And the commonality, you know, are the things that we focused on in the campaign. And that's people do want secure borders. They do want lower taxes, and they want safer communities. And I've said all throughout that a vote for Andy Zay is a vote for those things. And a vote for, you know, safer borders, lower taxes, and safer communities is issues that we've taken on in Indianapolis. And a lot of that is because the feds haven't.
Yeah.
So we've had to step up as a state and do some of those things. And even as recent as me asking the governor, calling on the governor to send some of our National Guard troops down to support Governor Abbott.
Yep.
And I've read recently that that's working.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed things. They're now going to
And
Arizona and New Mexico, but
Well, some people said, why do that? That's not our border. Well, guess what? Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah.
Because that stuff ends up here. We get fentanyl deaths every week in Fort Wayne, and most of that comes over the southern border.
Well, Sam Kionis, a friend of mine, wrote the book Dreamland that goes very deep into what was first heroin, now is fentanyl, and then has written a book on what's called The Least of Us, which is kind of a follow-up. And he has a chapter in there on Muncie, and that was about the evolution or revolution of Muncie and some of the communities there and how they've been downtrodden with what was originally heroin and then has progressed to fentanyl now. But it's a rise of where we can take our communities back. And that's been a little bit of an underlying theme in my campaign is we need to bring the American dream back.
Yeah.
Because I think our kids have been beaten over the head with technology and all the social media, some of the bullying and the ancillary symptoms of that, causes of that with depression and suicide. And they need to understand this is their life, this is their world, this is their time, and be able to experience that American dream.
My guest is Andy Zay. He is a senator for District 17 in the state of Indiana, but he's also one of the candidates for you all, if you're listening, all over the 3rd District for Congress for the coming session. Okay, so it's your wife, Cindy, and then you have 5 children?
Yes.
Is everybody on board? Are they ready to roll?
Well, everybody's on board. We're getting a little more effort out of some rather than others. My baby's a very active athlete, so he's doing a lot of baseball now. My daughters have been very helpful in the finance, and they're actually a part of the finance team of the campaign.
Okay.
And then we just had a baby a week ago, so we're grandparents for the 3rd time.
Oh, is that right?
Interjected that in the mix to the campaign, but Lucy is here with us now and healthy as ever, and mom's home, so that's exciting. And second time around is a lot of fun with the grandkids. So
yeah. I think you have to be 18 to vote in Indiana, unless, of course, the child is the grandchild of one of the candidates, and then they get an automatic pass.
Oh, yes. Lucy's already registered to vote.
Hey, Andy, listen, thanks so much. I appreciate you being here, and we're going to be back with more on the program, and Andy will be one of the people I'll try to talk to on Tuesday night as all the election results are coming in. We're going to be back straight ahead. This is Pat Miller here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM and at WOWO.com.
Hey, welcome back. Appreciate Andy Zay making his way here. Don't forget, Race for the Warrior. Those guys will be in here talking about an incredible event coming up out at Fort Wayne International Airport in just a few weeks, and we'll talk to them right after the bell strikes 1 o'clock here in a few minutes. Let me go on with some of the thoughts I was having about the occupiers and all of that. Today's occupiers are not anti-war protesters. If Hamas was winning the war with Israel, none of these students would be demonstrating for an end to the fighting. They would be cheering the deaths of Israeli Jews, just as they would have cheered if Iran's missiles had found their targets 2 weeks ago when the Iron Dome of Israel was blowing their missiles out of the sky. John Kennedy, who I love. John Kennedy, not the former president, John Kennedy, the Republican senator from the state of Louisiana, said it should not go unnoticed that President Biden has the ability to stop all this on a dime. Now, maybe not stop everything going on over in Israel, but everything that's going on in our campus and with them making comparisons with and allegiance to, you could stop that. And it shouldn't go unnoticed that Biden has done nothing. All he's got to do is call the college presidents and say, look, if you don't control your campuses, I'm going to withhold your federal money. The president hasn't done that. What did he say? The president said last week to Benjamin Netanyahu, hey, Bibi, if you don't let up, if you don't give them a decent ceasefire here, maybe we need to look at how much we're giving you in support. Oh, so you're going to threaten Israel that you're going to stop giving them money to protect themselves against the people that attack them through their southern border. And these kids who have more energy and testosterone than they have brains, and they're out there blowing their minds out for stuff on these college campuses with no idea what it is they're saying and what they're not saying, and you're going to just let them run amok and say nothing to the college presidents? Look, you pick up the phone and you call the presidents of UCLA, you call the presidents of any school in New York, including Columbia, Yale, Princeton, you call them. Harvard, call them. And say, if you don't stop this, I'll give you till Saturday next week. And if you don't stop this nonsense on your campus, I will stop the funding to your campus. If you're paying the whole bill, not taking any federal money for what goes on, and you want to keep doing this, that's on your dime. That's on your dime. Look, when will the president himself, not his little mouthpieces, when will he condemn these hate-filled little Gazas? He's putting more pressure on Israel than he is on Hamas. Do you guys realize that when whatever it is that goes on down there on the southern border of Israel with Hamas, do you understand that when that's over, you've got Hezbollah ready to come in from the north? And don't think Israel doesn't know it, and don't think that Israel isn't ready, because they do know it and they are ready. And I'm just telling you right now that if we don't stop this nonsense on our own campuses, we're not going to recognize it. You're going to have kids from campuses here embracing those that come over our southern border, because we're going to recognize violence, we're going to recognize protesters as real people, whether it's against Hamas or against us. A story I'm going to get to later. Do you realize that on one of our campuses, they took down the flag? And do you realize that the president of that university walked out with a new flag and put it up himself? And he said, as long as I am here on this campus, that flag will fly on this campus. The fact that you so support Hamas against Israel, and that causes you to take down the American flag? I'm sorry, are you idiots? Are you nuts? Can you possibly imagine where you would be in life, you little sheltered, elite, oversupplied, overfunded young brats? Can you possibly imagine what your life would be right now if Hamas had been running this country for the last 50 years instead of our democracy, even as broken and weak as it is sometimes? As broken and weak as we are at times, it is still far better than anything that comes out of Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran. Pick your poison. But they sit there and they're like, oh, they're out there with their goofy eyeglasses and their funny looks, and they like this. Part of the reason they like it, one kid said, well, I haven't been to class all week. Yeah, and your brains probably need a supercharger. You're not going to get it. Okay, listen, here we go. Top of the hour is coming up. Race for the Warrior. I'll get back to some of my diatribe here in a little bit after that. Thank you very much for being with us on this Saturday. Pat Miller with you here on WOWO 92.3 FM, 1190 AM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.